Yes.
I am a history professor here at Yale, and I teach American politics, and I want you to know that I sign an awful lot of Bill Buckley in my classes, particularly early Buckley, so my students have been reading God and Man at Yale. We've been reading McCarthy and His Enemies, and I frequently send students to the Manuscripts and Archives Division to look through the Buckley papers. And this semester I have students writing about the mayoral campaign, writing about the John Birch Society controversy. One student who's here is writing about Buckley and Catholicism, his relationship with Whittaker Chambers. So anyway, the legacy is here. And
you're under arrest.
And I guess one thing, I have two things, one of which is something that comes up in class often about early Buckley, and then one that is a sort of self-interested question. So the first is, students are often quite interested in this idea of this outsider identity and this kind of alienation from what Buckley articulated as a kind of establishment, and sort of the question of where exactly that comes from. Is it partly being a Catholic at a place like Yale? Is it just temperamental? Exactly what? Because, you know, I mean, Yale was liberal in certain ways in the 1950s, but, you know, Yale in 1940 does not go for Franklin Roosevelt, right? It goes for Wendell Willkie, and so I think we can overstate the sort of liberal socialistic nature of Yale during the 40s and 50s. So I'm curious if you have thoughts about sort of where in those very early years that sense of alienation and kind of outsiderness comes from, which becomes so important to his projects later on. And the second, more self-interested question is that I happen to be writing a biography of J. Edgar Hoover, and trying to think about, you know, the role of a figure like Hoover in conservative politics and the conservative movement in sort of mid-century. So I've been spending some time reading Buckley's FBI file, which is pretty interesting, although there's nothing too exciting in there. But I'm just wondering if any of you have any good anecdotes or anything interesting to say.
Things that should be in the FBI file but aren't.
I want to know what you really thought of Hoover, not what he wrote in National Review, and not these very polite letters that are in his FBI file. We'll say, thank you, Director Hoover. You know, I mean, he did have something of a relationship there, but I'm just curious if you can tell me what he really thought of J. Edgar Hoover, if you know, or if you have anything interesting to say on that point.
I'll say one thing. Bill was never so energized as when going after large authority. One of his great battles, he being a loyal son of Rome, was to attack popes. I mean, he just loved to get into a scrape with the Vatican. When he went after the John Birch Society, in history, it looks like, well, he was cleansing the movement of this irritant. At the time, the John Birch Society was a major player. Eddie Capano would know this. I mean, they had strings on advertising contracts for the magazine. They had strings on distributor deals for the magazine. They contributed. Their members actually wrote checks beyond the subscription fee. And, but Bill, while he was fearless, he was also a lover of danger. You got a story time here?
Yeah, what's the story about when he flew the plane in the dark?
Oh, he flew, as far as I'm aware.
The entire conservative movement was dependent on Bill somehow making it back.
I think he was still here at Yale.
He was still here, and he didn't intend to fly it in the dark. He had not taken instrument.
He was surprised that nightfall came.
Yeah, they'd been a bit
There he
delayed.
was, aloft.
Yeah, and however, instead of trying to put down at say Newport or someplace, he'd flown a buddy up to Boston.
Right.
And instead of putting down at Providence or someplace when night started to fall, he decided that he could safely follow the New York, New Haven, and Hartford railroad tracks back to New Haven, which he did successfully do,
Yep.
and did put the plane down. But yeah, I mean, there it was. He had a job to do, so he did it.
Here's a, this is classic Bill. You remember the 60s, a pretty sad time. People who were on the edge of political consensus are not getting just criticized, they're getting shot. I mean, politicians were getting shot. And we have our first briefing with our security detail, known then as the NYPD. Every cop in New York was for Bill Buckley for mayor. Everyone, black, white, Hispanic, didn't matter. And they trot out this horrific file of threats. And Bill, I could tell he was losing patience. He begins doing this. And he sits through it for a while, and all of a sudden he has something very important to attend to. And he leaves, and he gives me 2 directives. First, he's never attending a meeting of that kind again. I can attend them. You know, the reports that he might be shot in the morning did not concentrate his mind. They bored him. And the other was, you have to take steps to be sure Patsy never hears about any of this. This was early in the campaign, and Bill was, Bill was still hoping that Patsy would support him in the campaign.
You know, just,
Oh, go ahead, Bill.
no, I think, I'm glad you've got yours.
Our time has come.
Can I
Our
just-
time has come. We thank you all
That's
for
right.
being here.
This was going to be the most brilliant remark of the entire panel.
Let's hear that. And then-
No, it's more brilliant if unsaid.